Welcome to the Attract Your Ideal Clients podcast. This show is for entrepreneurs who sell their expertise, including trainers, consultants, and coaches looking for real-world, actionable marketing advice to help them identify their competitive strengths, find and fix the marketing bottlenecks that are holding them back, and confidently make the right marketing decisions for their unique business. Today, we'll be talking about ways to use highly targeted pay-per-click advertising to reach your ideal prospects and generate fresh leads into your sales pipeline. Joining me is Carissa Richardson, founder and CEO of Kindred Strategy, a paid advertising agency in Dublin, Ohio. Quick note, I've recently updated the show name from Attract Your Ideal Customers to Attract Your Ideal Clients to align more with the specific needs of trainers, consultants, and coaches. Now, before we get started, if you've hit a plateau in your training, consulting, or coaching business, I want to invite you to visit marcusschaller.com/subscribe for weekly troubleshooting guides and tips to help you find and fix the weak spots in your marketing that are holding you back, fine-tune your positioning and marketing strategy, and start growing again by attracting more of your ideal clients. Again, that's marcusschaller.com/subscribe. So, Carissa, I'm really excited to talk to you today, particularly about pay-per-click advertising, right? And how it relates to B2B, business to business, particularly how it relates to people, entrepreneurs that sell expertise. So trainers, consultants, coaches, right? And I've used pay-per-click for 20 plus years. I'm I'm not an expert at everything about it, but I'm pretty familiar with it. But my guess is that there's a lot of people that are in that expertise space that might be aware of it because they've seen ads on Google or YouTube or certainly LinkedIn, but might not really grasp that it's something that's a possible tool for them to use in a very, very targeted way, in a way that's able to target executives and, enterprise organizations, like all sorts of options there that they might not even be aware of. So I wanted to start out talking to you. First of all, if you can, from your perspective, just kind of give us an overview of what pay-per-click advertising is, where it exists, and then we can talk kind of high level, like what are some of the broad uses for it for this particular type of audience, right? The experts, right? And then we can kind of, drill down on some of the specific ways to start implementing it, maybe some options for people to start trying it out. So let's start out with, if you can just kind of describe what pay-per-click is, right?
Yeah.
Just kind of overview.
Yeah, definitely. So pay-per-click is typically describes paid search advertising, but it's really any ad that you're paying by the click. So the reason it really refers a lot to paid search typically, and that's the kind of the moniker people will use for the acronym people will use for paid search, is because most other types of advertising are paid by the impression or by video completion or things like that. So pay-per-click is really, search is really the main advertising channel that is still pay-per-click. So it exists off most major search engines. However, Google owns about 90+% of the market, of the search market. So that is typically where I focus my efforts with clients, just because you're going to get cover the most ground there. But there is Bing, there is Yahoo as well. If you have more budget, you can always set up campaigns on those as well to reach an even higher percentage of people. But I find that Google, you're really going to typically reach the majority of your audience. And it is a paid tactic. So there is the organic side of that as well, where people oftentimes think SEO, get SEO and SEM confused, or SEM and PPC are kind of like the same term. There's all these acronyms. So SEO and search engine marketing, SEM, are kind of the owned and paid side of things. So pay-per-click is really focusing on the paid side, where SEO is really focusing on organically for free, getting your listing up higher, which is really a long-term great strategy to have, and you should be doing it. Paid and pay-per-click is really there to help you in the meantime, to show up for the terms you want to show up with organically immediately, or also terms that you might not ever be able to rank well on for SEO because it's not a huge part of your business enough for you to optimize your website towards it, but you still want your ads to show there. So paid and SEO go very, PPC and SEO go really well together. But it's definitely, one is more of like a long-term commitment and one is more of like still takes a while to build up, but more of a short-term then solution.
And just to quickly clarify, SEO stands for search engine optimization, right? So that's that organic side of it. And beyond even Google, which you and I had chatted about a few days ago when we were talking about getting together and recording this today, there's the search, the intended search, or the I don't know if that's the right term, high intention or buying intention part of it, which is like somebody's actively searching for, I'm looking for a consultant in this space, or I need to solve this problem. And that's where the search engines, primarily come in. But then there's the other side of it, right? You have YouTube, which of course is related to Google search because it's owned by Google, and there's a lot of interplay between those types of campaigns. But now we also have a lot of social options too. So can you talk a little bit about where pay-per-click applies to social media channels as well as YouTube?
Yeah. So social media and YouTube are typically going to be purchased on an impression basis. So that is often referred to as CPM, which is cost per thousand impressions. But both are very valuable. YouTube, specifically, you won't pay until somebody watches at least 15 seconds of your ad. So they always have that button after about 5 seconds that says skip. If somebody does that and hasn't watched 15 seconds, you don't get charged for it, but you still get that impression. So YouTube's a little more of a cost per view type model, up to 15 seconds. And then LinkedIn and other social channels such as that, like Meta, Facebook, Instagram, those are more of a CPM model, so cost per impression. But really each plays a part in that funnel where you like your awareness, your consideration, your conversion. I would say that the social and YouTube type platforms are more up in that awareness, maybe getting into the consideration. And then your paid search will get more into that consideration / conversion. And the metrics I'm looking at for that would be like awareness would be more your impressions, your reach, your frequency type numbers that you would pay attention to. Consideration would be more of your clicks to your website, click-through rate, website traffic, so how engaged they are on the site, how much time they're spending, how many pages they're visiting. And then that conversion obviously is they submitted a lead form or something like that.
So for somebody listening who's trying to wrap their head around, like, is any of this even something that's worth diving into? As far as our purposes today, when we're talking about using these platforms to reach a very, very targeted audience, am I correct in assuming that even though there's differences in how it's paid or how it, the cost of it or how it's measured and charged, that essentially the pay-per-click or pay per impression or impression costs or pricing essentially is going to be, the other stuff is still relevant, right? We're just talking about whether you're paying per every, I mean, it does matter in the granular part, right? Because if somebody's clicking on, there's a much more intention there. But I just want to kind of frame it. So for people listening, when we're talking about ways essentially to reach a very targeted audience in a very, very potentially cost-effective way, there might be differences in the performance and the ROI between those, but the other things are kind of similar, right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I typically look at it as what we're trying to accomplish. So if typically for most of my clients, especially in the space we're talking about, it's the number one priority is getting leads and getting new interest in the door and meetings on the calendar, intro calls, things like that. So that is where search is going to be probably your best place to start if you only have a finite amount of money, which most of us do, especially small business owners, or solo people. Search is a really good way to get a warm audience. So you're not having to spend as much money to get that return. Whereas YouTube and LinkedIn can be highly targeted. YouTube, you can target based on the content the person's watching. You can target based on the industry they work in, things like that. And then LinkedIn obviously has a plethora of information you can target based on. But those are going to require a little more of a spend to get to that conversion, just because that person, even though we know they're qualified, you're hitting them kind of cold. They weren't looking for the information. So it's going to take them a little longer to get through that funnel to finally get to conversion. But yeah, I mean, they're great platforms. LinkedIn, I will say, is a little bit pricier. They kind of know they have a stronghold on the data that they have. There's really, I mean, I work in this industry. I've worked in it for over 20 years, and I don't know anybody else besides maybe some programmatic platforms where you have access to like Oracle data and Dun and Bradstreet. There's no social platform that gives you access to the data that LinkedIn gives you access to. So, and they know that. So you're going to see much higher, the cost per 1,000 impressions is going to be a lot higher on LinkedIn than it will be anywhere else.
And let's talk about that real quick, like the cost, right? And not specific costs, of course, because it's going to depend on who you're targeting. It's going to depend on things like the quality of the landing page and how well you're competing. There's so many little nuances to it. But just taking a step back and looking about, like, let's frame cost with this, right? Because there are there's a wide range of pricing strategies for consulting and training and coaching. Everything from very low price to, hundreds of thousands of dollars for an engagement. Where this comes in, and I just based on my experience in both sides of paid marketing as well as the consulting and coaching side of things, is to kind of look at this from a point of view of that if an engagement, a paid engagement with a new customer or client can result in significant fees. Like if you get a new client, that the lifetime value of that client or customer is 50 grand, 75 grand, 200,000, whatever, even 15 grand, whatever it is, right? Versus 300. If you're selling a course, let's say you're selling it's a $350 course and you don't really have any kind of, upsells or anything like that. When you think about the cost of what it actually would cost you to reach, let's say on LinkedIn, because it's the most expensive as far as that targeting ability, because everybody is volunteering their information, right? I think just framing that first so that people listening aren't just going, oh God, how much is it? Right? Because if you think about, again, using LinkedIn just as a kind of like a case study for this to give us a kind of baseline, if you're able to target an exact title and an exact geography with so many different particulars of how you can basically filter that search and filter that campaign, even if you're spending hypothetically hundreds of dollars, a few $1,000s, whatever it winds up being, but you're consistently able to engage with, start conversations with, get people in your funnel. I just want to kind of frame it from that point of view to start when people listening is like, start with how much is a qualified prospect worth to you, right? How much is every really good conversation with your target audience worth to you? And then look at the costs and make sure that it makes sense. And I just want to throw that out there and get your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And just knowing how we talked about each of those fits, how each of those fits into the funnel. Maybe search, you do send them directly to an informational page with a lead form, but maybe for LinkedIn, you send them to like an email capture that gets them into a conversion, like a lead nurture funnel. So I think that if you are strategic about where that person is at the first time they're seeing your ad, you might say, okay, well, it's probably a big ask to ask them to spend $500 to take this course, but I could offer them this handout or checklist or something that could be really valuable to them, get their email, and then put them on the path to signing up for that course once they see what an expert I am, how much I have to offer them, how helpful I could be. So I think it's just being smart about what you're promoting on each of those platforms. I think you could do the bigger sell, the heavier sell on search ads because that person is looking for help. They're saying like, I need help doing this and I don't know what I'm like, I'm looking for somebody to help me. But on LinkedIn, they're not necessarily doing that. They're just scrolling. And if something catches their eye, they find interesting, they might not know you yet. You don't have that legitimacy built up to say, hey, give me all this money. But if you can kind of get them into a nurture path where they can start to slowly see that expertise, then you're much more likely to get them to convert. It might just take a little longer. But again, LinkedIn, they're kind of starting up in that awareness consideration part of the funnel. So that is expected.
So let's expand on that. Let's drill down on what that process might look like, right? And we might repeat a couple of things that you just said as far as those specific types of offers, right? But I want to create some context for how this looks as a process, right? So I'm gonna throw out some ideas. Correct me if I'm misinterpreting it or I'm not explaining it clearly, but kind of starting with the very top, right? We've all been on LinkedIn. Anybody listening to this, I'm sure, has been on LinkedIn, right? We've all been on Google. Most of us have been on YouTube. We do use Facebook, whatever we use. Like we're familiar with seeing ads, right? We're familiar with seeing sponsored content. So starting from there, hopefully everybody listening can say, oh yeah, at least I'm familiar with what we're talking about. I've seen it enough times. Even if I wouldn't necessarily create ads the same way, everybody's going to do it differently. So at the very, very top level, there's this impression or there's this sponsored content or ad that you're basically creating and you're trying as best as you can to serve it to a very specific audience. Would that be an accurate way to describe the very top level of this?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, more like just introducing yourself, saying, here's the name of my company, here's what we do, here's how it helps people or how it can relieve one of your pain points. That's kind of that initial awareness part of the funnel.
So drilling down on that now you're bringing up there's a variety of what you could be saying in this, right? So there's the branding side of it. This is who we are, the logo, it's the whatever the catchphrase is, the tagline, maybe it's more of a branding thing, right? You're trying to get a lot of impressions, people are seeing the name of your business enough times. But it could be a very specific offer, right? It could be something like a workshop or a webinar or a white paper, if people are still doing white papers, whatever it is, it could be informational in nature, right? It could be more of a call for a consultation, a little bit more of a hard sell, which to your point earlier, if somebody's actively searching for a solution, that might be the most appropriate. In addition to those types, are there any I miss, like just in general categories of not how to say, not how to actually create the ad, but like what an ad might actually offer?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is to know what you want the end result to be. So if it's just to get your name out there among the target audience, then obviously having your logo really big, having your name really big, what you do really big is very important. If it's to increase the people in your nurture funnel, then you would want to offer some sort of incentive because we all know that it's gotten worse and worse. We're very reluctant to give anybody our information. Just because we know it's going to get us on an email list and we're going to get all these emails. So you need to give somebody something that is of enough value that they find it worthwhile to give you their information. And also people don't have a lot of patience. So if that lead form is more than 1, 2, 3 questions, you're probably going to start to lose them and have a lower conversion rate. So I think it just depends on what you want the actual outcome to be. If you want just straight leads, then you might want to, again, have a lead form very short, but maybe a few more questions since you're not going to have the nurture funnel to kind of gather more information. But I think those are kind of the 3 options, like the awareness, big, putting your brand out there, consideration, maybe offering something up to get an email address so that you can push them through and get more information as you go. and form that relationship a little bit more. And then that conversion where you know they're in your target, you know they're looking for what you offer. You just want to send them to a lead form so you can get that information and set up a meeting.
And drilling down a little bit or talking a little bit more about the branding side of it, I'm going to, just from my perspective, right, looking at this particular, industry, again, experts, trainers, consultants, coaches, not that branding play wouldn't have any value, right? It's, if you're in a larger training company, right, there, and you have the budget for it, there might be a place for that. But I'm going to, just for this conversation, I'm going to kind of separate that out, right? Just to keep it, simple, because
Fairness is expensive.
yeah, and it's, again, I'm not saying that there's no value to a branding play. I'm just going to say, for people that are like, look, I got to get clients, I got to generate some leads, I got to create some conversations. It's the conversations I have with people that are what create engagements, right? Or paid work. So just for this conversation, let's exclude the branding side and focus on, okay, there's a general approach to selling expertise, which is you're going to start by leading with value. You're going to be sharing some kind of value. That could be, again, content. It could be a workshop. It could be an insight, whatever. You're really trying to basically share. It's very much a content marketing thing. It's so perfect for content marketing, right?
It really
And
is.
yeah, and so, and then from that, depending on the urgency of the problem the person's dealing with, and that's where we get into personas and different types of target audiences and target customers. But from that, now you're starting to build a little trust. You're building some familiarity, right? You're kind of greasing the wheels for there to be, now at the end of this content piece, I want to know more, or I want to drill down, further into this. And that's where you have, generically, you might have, the free consultation or a strategy call, whatever. And I'm using broad strokes for this. There can be a lot of nuances in how you approach, but does that kind of jive for you, for this audience, of being like, hey, if we're going to start somewhere, right? We want to keep it simple. There's a lot of different ways we can do it, but that general strategy would be a good starting point. What do you think about that?
I agree. I think that um, content is huge, and that I think is where a lot of people struggle because they don't have the content to offer. And like I said, people aren't very likely to leave information unless they feel like they're getting something really valuable in return. Another thing I've learned working with some coaches in the past too is just the ad type. This kind of changes subject a little bit, but um, I think video ads, and even honestly, I've had ads where the person just was sitting in their car and filmed a vertical video and we used it in the ad, performs so well because I do think it allows the person very quickly to feel like they know you, and it builds trust much quicker than a static image that's like, here's my company and here's what we do and download this white paper or case study or whatever. I think that video saying all that and then having the link to download the case study, it just forms that relationship much quicker. And with coaching and consulting, I feel like that relationship is so much more important than most other types of industries.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's trust, relationships, and this is where I think it gets tricky for these types of entrepreneurs, because it is all about relationships. And I think marketing, for people that aren't marketers, marketing can be misunderstood. Marketing is, oh, that's ads, which it might be, right? But it's also how you think about your messaging. It's how you think about the target audience. It's how you think about what kind of content you're creating, what organizations you're speaking at and conferences. Like, all this is a marketing mindset thing. So I just want to kind of frame that real quick, because it is about relationships with this, right? So when I'm thinking, because I'm in the same space, I'm a coach and I do freelance work and stuff, what I'm trying to do really is create value and engage people and earn that trust with them. It's funny that you just said about the recording, kind of like just kind of like, I don't want to say lo-fi, but like, you're just recording your phone. I need to start doing that more. I think I'm one of those people, like, I have a face for radio, so I'm like one of those people that, like, I'm so averse to like being right there in the camera. But maybe I need to get over that. And I think it's just a good point where you'd be like, hey, some people want to see your face. Like, I don't want to see my face on my LinkedIn feed. But it's a good point. There's a lot of creative ways to do this. And I think one of the things I'd add there too, you mentioned about quality of content. Content marketing back in the day when you and I started, right? It was special, right? It took a lot of effort. You were different if you were creating an ebook. Content now with AI, it's like there's no shortage of content. So one side note I'd want to throw out there and get your thoughts about is if you're gonna create content, please, please, please focus on doing something that's not just scraped from the internet, or it's just the same kind of redundant stuff that everybody's seeing. Because ultimately, the quality of your thinking and your expertise and your insights and your thought leadership is really going to demonstrate, or it's going to represent the quality of what you're going to be able to bring in an engagement.
Sure.
Um, so I just want to get your thoughts on that too, because I think it's
Yeah, I
really
mean,
important starting point.
yeah, that's your first impression with people. So, I mean, that's why your website's so important. The web experience is important. You don't want your website to be slow. You want everything to look nice. Like you don't want it, you want it to reflect who you are, and the type of person you are, so that somebody kind of knows what they're, especially because that's why most consultants, like I know in my business, most of my referrals and my clients refer to me because they're like, we like working with you. Um, and so making sure that my website sounds the way that I talk and the way that I approach things, and anything I put out there has that kind of brand spin, like, or my voice behind it. And it's not just an AI like spit out of a robot telling people stuff, because people can feel that ahead of time. And I mean, you really, sometimes you only have one chance a lot of times to make that first impression. And if it feels not authentic to somebody, they're gonna, I mean, there's other people they can go to. So they're gonna find other people that are more authentic. So I think it is authenticity, and people can kind of feel that when they look at something, when they read something, they can feel how much effort you put in and how much thought you put into it.
And that will help guide people when they start thinking about, again, we're at the very beginning of this kind of process, right? You're creating an ad or some kind of sponsored content that you're going to share through these platforms. Authenticity, being real, right? 3 years ago, we wouldn't have had to talk about AI, right? Because AI wasn't a player in this. ChatGPT didn't exist, at least not in the way we see it today. Now we really do, because there is this tremendous momentum, and maybe it's waning a bit because of the quality that we're seeing, but there's this tremendous energy behind how now you don't have to spend time creating content. Now, if you are selling some kind of commodity, or if you're selling something that, whatever it is, anything other than coaching, consulting, and training, right? Then maybe there's a place for that, right? But if you're selling your expertise. Just taking that moment back and thinking about when you're creating content, whether it's paid or organic, or your LinkedIn feed or whatever you're doing, to really consider what are you putting out there, and whatever you think you're saving time by now, churning out these kind of listicles that you could just tell are just, yeah, this is just, there's nothing about this that's unique or special, or there's, anything coming from your unique point of view. Be really, really careful if you might be like throwing away the baby with the bathwater with that stuff, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that if that's all that somebody holds on to of yours and that's all they have to look at, it's like that is what they're going to remember about you. So you don't want it to be um low quality, because then that's going to be their impression.
So there's the opportunity then. So somebody picturing, they go, okay, cool, I kind of get it. I could create basically social media posts if I wanted to, and I'm just paying to reach a particular audience, right? As opposed, it might even be a very similar thing that I'm putting out anyway. Now let's go down another layer. Now you're speaking to, okay, you have some kind of capture element to this. That capture element can be, as you mentioned earlier, it could be a lead form. Maybe they're subscribing to your newsletter, or they're going to come to a workshop. Some kind of like, I'm giving you my information in exchange for value,
Mhm.
content, right? More content. It could be, I want to actually talk to you. I want to actually get on a call, and that would basically be, where they are in the buyer's journey. If they're ready, they need to solve this sooner than later. Um, those are really the two big ones, right? That I'm thinking. Is there something I'm missing again for consulting, training, coaching? Is there some aspect or other strategy that I'm not thinking of right now?
No, I mean, I guess the only other thing I've seen is like an online community or things like that, but that's basically like the same thing. You're offering to collect their data for
It's
something.
still an exchange of valuable information kind of thing. Yeah. But that's a good point though, because you can have a community. It can be even something that's a low free kind of thing or a low cost thing. So again, it brings up there's so many varieties you could approach this with. So when we're talking about the overall structure, none of this is like now this is formulatic and you have to basically choose one. You can use your creativity with this as much as you want. I just kind of give people a basic skeleton framework for this, so it's not like I don't even know where to start, right? And now once you're at that point, then you come to at some point, depending on the offer, whether it was a conversation or their, an email subscription. Now, eventually, depending on which offer it is, it's going to come down to a conversation, right? So that's really just comes down to how somebody's own lead funnel is approached. So that's kind of there's three steps to it, right? There's you have the ads, then you have the capture, which is either a conversation or they're subscribing for something or getting some information. And then you have the actual end result, which ultimately is an engagement, but there's a sales conversation between, right? Does that jive for you?
Yes, exactly. That's like the ideal. And ideally, you would have ways to measure this setup
Mm.
throughout, whether you use Google Analytics or you're using a LinkedIn Pixel or Google Tag, something like that, to kind of track those key conversion points. And a lot of these systems will integrate with CRM systems. So if they fill out a lead form, it can go directly into your CRM. So there's especially with the big ones like Meta, LinkedIn, Google, there's a lot of integrations you can incorporate to make sure that data flows pretty seamlessly without having to do too much technical stuff on the back end.
And that also brings up another point that I think is important for the context. This, for most people, I imagine in this space again, it's a relatively low volume play as far as what they need for it to be very successful, right? So automation, just to kind of like frame the automation part, it's nice to have it go into a CRM. It's nice to have it be automated. But if you're talking about trying to engage, let's say at the very high end, very, very, hundreds of $1,000s, you don't need really that many leads to make it incredibly lucrative. So even if it's manual at this point, it's still okay. Like let's imagine you have the most targeted, restricted, filtered campaign on the planet, and you have one lead coming in a week or a month. That could still be like huge, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's just the key. I think just an important thing and a part of the process that a lot of people miss is the measurement part. And the testing part. So I look at advertising as a better way to understand your customer. So have multiple messages, have multiple call to actions, and test those against each other and see what your audience wants to respond to, what's going to get their attention, because then you're learning. So you're not only just running a campaign with the benefit of maybe getting some leads, but you're running a campaign with the benefit of getting some leads and also being able to do it more efficiently in the future. And I mean, you might learn something about your customer that's going to help you on other marketing materials or conversations you have, sales pitches. Like there's just so much to learn from paid. And if you're going to put the money behind it, you might as well make the most of it and learn as much as possible while you're getting leads. So I never want to discount the measurement side of it and how important it is, not just to measure leads, but also just to learn so you can apply that to other aspects of the business.
Such a good point, such an important point. So glad you brought it up. We didn't mention one of the greatest things about this is that you can actually split test really easily.
Yeah.
Like you can have two similar ads running against each other. It's a little easier on certain, platforms than others, like on Google ads, from what I remember, it's if it's a text ad, especially, it's very, very easy. You can try one headline against another. So that's an important kind of detail to make sure people know. Like you can basically go in there and say, hey, I'm not sure which headline is going to work. And yeah, I'd love to know up front, but I don't know, right? None of us know, right? So, you'll always be surprised by what works sometimes. But if you could start with like, hey, this is headline one, headline two, we're going to A B split test it. Very simple once you get used to it. To your point also about how it applies to your other marketing. Let's say you're not really sure what your key messaging is going to be. You know, you could be focused. There's this like three different types of problems I could be solving. I'm still a little, excuse me, I'm still a little confused or on the fence about which way to go. You could test this with a target market. So one other really, really good use case for this type of campaign is beyond even just kind of filling your pipeline is testing your ideas,
Mhm.
right? You could be like, I'm going to actually test some offers and I'm going to see what's really resonating. Even if it's like, hey, I'm going to put a video out that's going to be real good content that's going to almost like there's no CTA to it. I'm going to
Mhm.
see which ones on those on YouTube, let's say, outperform the others by how much people watch, right? So there's lots of ways to approach this.
Exactly. And if you're like, hey, I've been hearing some of my customers mention this problem, I wonder if this is a bigger thing. Like maybe you put out um like a how-to guide or like something to help somebody with that problem and see how many downloads it gets. And then you're like, oh, maybe this is something I need to start offering or mentioning to people when we're talking about coaching, like I can help you with this problem. So yeah, there's a lot of ways. I mean, you can do this organically as well, but the problem with organic is you're really limited with how many impressions you get. Facebook, Meta, LinkedIn, they really kind of crack down on how much your post is seen organically, which is why it's so hard. Everybody wants to go viral, but it's very, very hard to do that. So paid is just a good way to get that reach and feedback, putting a little bit of money behind it, where it's going to be really hard to get that same equal reach and feedback using an organic post.
Yeah, and I think the underlying lesson here, and it is whether it's pay per click or organic or your website or your cold calling or your email camps, whatever it is, it's constant iteration. It's iterative. The marketing is not as much as I would love to know that if I go in with a client and say, here's what you should say in your ad, or here's what you should, I would like, of course, you want to get as close to as possible, right? But it's always going to involve testing and iteration. And it is a process that might take a little time. So I just want to kind of throw that out there to people listening. You could get lucky and nail it on your first campaign, and I hope you do, right? But if you don't throw it away. Like, don't just go, like, you've heard this a ton of times, right? People say, like, oh, I've tried advertiser, I've tried email, it doesn't work. Like, yeah, you did one, like you tried this thing, it didn't work right away. So you thought it doesn't work. Like, it's not how marketing works, right? So just framing it and making sure that people listening have the right expectations, have reasonable and realistic expectations is that yes, you can get very lucky. And if you've been doing your business for a long time and you really, really understand your ideal customers and you spend the time to target it well, you could nail it right off the bat, right? Because you understand them. But especially if you're newer or you're still kind of like experimenting with different approaches, allow yourself the time to learn this stuff and to try different approaches because it could be, you'll notice, especially if you're split testing, if one ad outperforms the other by 25%, whatever metric we're going to use, and then you do that again, and then you do that again, you keep the winner, and then try another thing, and then you keep the winner. Like it's like this almost exponential. I don't know if it's mathematically correct to say it's exponential, but it feels like it could be this exponential curve upwards, right?
Absolutely. And I'll add on to that that I think just to manage expectations, because I try to do this with my clients as well. I think a lot of clients will come to me and think that paid is the quick fix and it's a magic bullet and I need leads for next month and I'm going to do some paid ads. And while it will happen faster than organic type of marketing, it does take, I mean, I would go into it with the mindset of having at least 6 months to a year commitment in your head because of all the things we just mentioned, because of your ability to continually optimize and improve. I mean, the first three, especially if you're spending a very, very low amount of money, it takes a while to get, the less you spend, the longer it takes to get the amount of data that you need to really make an educated decision on, oh, this is actually working better than the other thing. Because if you only have 500 impressions, That's not a lot of data to say, oh, this is performing better than this. It's really a couple thousand impressions or more before you can really start to see patterns, and month over month and things like that. So I just think going into it with a longer term mindset. And of course, if there's seasonality to your product, don't run all year, but things like search, I run search for my business and I run it all year long. I have a set budget. It's worked into my marketing, my business marketing budget. And I just keep it running all year long, because if somebody's looking for digital advertising services, I want to make sure that my name is popping up in the mix with everybody else. So even if it is a seasonal business, I would still even encourage you to run paid search all year round, because when somebody needs you, they need you. Um, but I do think it's something to really keep in mind, and I wanted to mention, because I do think people tend to not give paid ads the time that they need to really, before they give up, because it's scary. I'm a small business owner. I understand like putting that money out there is scary. And if you don't feel like it's working, it can be really easy to say, never mind, I'm just going to pull that back. But you will see the benefit the longer you keep them running. And especially if you're using it to learn and test and optimize, you'll get that return. It isn't a silver bullet.
But compare it right to you thinking again specifically this group of people, trainers, consultants, coaches. They're engaging in higher ticket item or services, right? They're spending a lot of their time trying to get speaking engagements, maybe. Whatever their business development kind of go-to is, right? Maybe they do outreach and email and calling, right? Very time intensive to do that targeted, right? They're probably doing a lot of networking. And I would guess that a lot of people are doing a lot of networking in places where their target audience isn't even at, right? So they're spending a lot of time, they're traveling, they're going. When you think about compared to all that activity, right? All the money you might be investing in that stuff, but certainly the value of your time, especially if you are in a situation now, in a situation where you have a good engagement right now, you have a couple, 3 ongoing clients, you have 10 ongoing clients, you have 1 huge client, whatever it is, and you got money coming, you're good. And you're trying to think about, where do I want to be in a year? I don't have that much time left over for business development. I don't have the time to cold call. I don't have the time to go all these conferences. What can I do? You think about the time it takes to learn this stuff or to engage somebody that can help them with it, right? The money it takes to do that. It's not nothing. But if you're investing in, where do I want to be 6 months to 12 months from now? I think that's the proper mindset for this. Not, oh my God, I don't have any customers and clients. What am I going to do? I better do some ads. That's probably not the right mindset to start from. It's like, look, I have X number of dollars to play with. I want to learn what I can from it. I want to use them wisely, that money wisely. But where do I want to be in a few months? And if I start investing the time and energy into this now, a little bit every day, a little time every day, read a book, go talk to you, whatever, right? That's the real payoff in my perspective for this particular audience.
Yes, for sure. I think you have to just be in it for the long haul. And it has to be, I think, really making it a part of your overall marketing strategy. So you have a line item for networking events for the year and how much you're going to pay to go to networking events for the year. You should have a line item for paid search or LinkedIn ads. You just put it in your budget when you're budgeting for the next year. And just have it in there, because then you won't be tempted to say, oh, never mind, I'm going to pull this budget, because it wasn't just like play money. It was like something you had planned for. And have it work as a layer of your overall marketing and not just kind of something you're trying.
That's such a good point. We're starting to run out of time. I want to be respectful of your time. One of the things I did want to get into was talking about LinkedIn, particularly talking about YouTube, talking about the specifics of Google searches. But what I'd like to do is, rather than try to rush through that stuff in the last few minutes, I'd like to just open invitation for you to come back soon. And maybe you and I can talk one episode specifically about LinkedIn. We could talk maybe a different episode. I'm not trying to put you on the hook here, right? But to talk in more depth about each one, because I think that while there's a lot of similarities as far as overall strategy, I think there's enough differences between LinkedIn and YouTube and Google searches to really warrant like here's some particular details that you want to be aware of. Here are the opportunities, the ups and upsides and downsides for each one. So no pressure. You don't have to commit, but if you're open to it, maybe we can do a part two, etc., and we can get into the
Yes,
details of that stuff.
I would love to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Special thanks to Carissa Richardson for sharing her insights about ways to use highly targeted pay-per-click advertising to reach your ideal prospects and generate fresh leads into your sales pipeline. If you enjoyed the show, I hope you'll consider subscribing and leaving a review. And don't forget to visit marcusschaller.com/subscribe for weekly troubleshooting guides and tips to help you find and fix the weak spots in your marketing that are holding you back, fine-tune your positioning and marketing strategy, and start growing again by attracting more of your ideal clients. Again, that's marcusschaller.com/subscribe.